The year is 1963. The world is divided by ideology, fear, and the silent tension of nuclear power. Two superpowers stand face to face, separated not just by oceans, but by beliefs, politics, and visions for humanity's future. On one side stands the capitalist West, on the other, the communist East. And at the center of this fragile balance stands one man, the young, charismatic President of the United States, whose speeches inspire millions and whose decisions shape global destiny. On November 22, 1963, that balance is shattered. A motorcade moves slowly through the streets, crowds wave, cameras flash, smiles are exchanged. It is supposed to be just another political visit, another day of public connection between leadership and people. But history is not written on ordinary days. History is written in moments no one expects. Within seconds, gunshots echo. Confusion turns into panic. The crowd freezes. Then, screams begin. In that moment, the course of history changes forever. What happened that day would become one of the most investigated, debated, and emotionally charged events in modern history. But beyond the headlines, beyond the official reports, and beyond decades of speculation, lies a story about power, fear, geopolitics, and the fragile nature of leadership in a divided world. To understand the shock of that day, you must understand the world of the early 1960s. This was not a peaceful era. This was an era where school children practiced nuclear drills, families built bunkers under their homes, newspapers printed daily stories about missile ranges and nuclear tests. Humanity was living under the shadow of total destruction. The Cold War had turned the world into a chessboard. Every country, every alliance, every revolution was viewed through the lens of global dominance. In this environment, the presidency of the United States was not just a political role. It was a position that carried the responsibility of preventing global catastrophe. The young president represented something new. He spoke about space exploration, civil rights, and a new generation of leadership. He was not just leading a nation. He was shaping the identity of an era. And then, in one afternoon, everything stopped. Within hours of the shooting, authorities began searching for answers. Investigators traced the suspected shots to a specific building, the Texas School Book Depository. Inside, evidence would soon be discovered that would dominate global headlines for decades. The investigation moved fast. In times of national crisis, speed becomes critical. The public demanded answers. The world demanded stability. And the government needed to show control. Soon, a suspect was identified. The suspect's background added layers of mystery. He had served in the military, he had lived overseas, he had publicly supported political ideologies that clashed with American policy during the Cold War. In an era of extreme political tension, this background alone fueled fear and speculation. Investigators traced connections to the Soviet Union, the primary geopolitical rival of the United States during that era. For many Americans, this raised terrifying questions. Was this just a crime? Or was it an act connected to global conflict? But the investigation moved forward methodically. Law enforcement agencies launched one of the largest investigations in American history. Thousands of interviews were conducted, leads poured in from across the country and even internationally. Witness statements, forensic evidence, photographs, and intelligence reports were analyzed in enormous detail. The scale was massive. Analysts worked around the clock. Every possible connection was explored. Every witness was questioned. Every piece of physical evidence was cataloged and examined repeatedly. In the early stages of the Cold War, trust was fragile. Any sign of foreign involvement could have triggered military escalation. That is why the investigation was not just about solving a crime. It was about protecting global stability. As the investigation continued, another shocking event unfolded. The suspect himself was killed before facing trial. The man who shot him was later identified as Jack Ruby. This moment shocked the nation once again. Now the person who could have answered many questions was gone forever. And with that, speculation began growing. People started asking questions that would last generations. Was this really the work of a single individual? Were there hidden forces behind the event? Or was it simply a tragic moment caused by one man acting alone? Governments often rely on official investigations to provide closure, but public trust is built on transparency, and when an event is as shocking as this, closure becomes very difficult. In the days following the tragedy, the nation faced another urgent challenge: leadership continuity. Within hours, power transferred to Lyndon B. Johnson. This transfer of power was critical. The world was watching closely. Any sign of instability could have encouraged geopolitical rivals to take advantage of the situation. The peaceful transition demonstrated institutional strength. But emotionally, the country was grieving. Schools closed, churches filled, television broadcasts stopped regular programming. For many families, it felt like losing someone they personally knew. That is the power of leadership during mass media expansion. Leaders were no longer distant figures. Television had brought them into living rooms. People felt connected to them, and when tragedy struck, it felt deeply personal. As the months passed, official investigations reached conclusions. They analyzed ballistic trajectories, they reconstructed timelines, they evaluated photographs and film footage frame by frame, they reviewed thousands of pages of testimony. The official position was clear. The act was carried out by one individual, without proven involvement of larger organized conspiracies. But history is not shaped only by official findings. History is shaped by memory, fear, and unanswered questions. To understand why this event still matters, you must understand what leadership symbolized in the 1960s. The world was not just divided politically, it was divided ideologically. Democracy versus communism, individual freedom versus state control. Every global event was interpreted through this lens. For citizens of the United States, the presidency symbolized security and national identity. For allies around the world, it symbolized stability. For rivals, it symbolized power. When tragedy struck at that level, it did not just affect one country, it affected global psychology. Decades passed, generations grew up hearing about that day. Historians wrote books, journalists produced documentaries, researchers analyzed new evidence. Declassified documents slowly revealed details about intelligence monitoring, Cold War fears, and political tensions of the time. And still, debates continued. Why? Because humans search for meaning in tragedy. When events are simple, we accept them. But when events change history, we look for deeper explanations. This is not unique to one country. Throughout human history, major turning points have generated alternative theories, competing narratives, and emotional interpretations. Technology also played a role. This was one of the first global tragedies captured extensively on film and television. Visual evidence changed how people processed historical events. Seeing something creates a stronger emotional memory than reading about it. That visual memory is one reason why this event remains so powerful decades later. The legacy of that era extends beyond politics. It changed how security was handled. It changed how leaders interacted with crowds. It changed intelligence cooperation between agencies. It even influenced how global leaders traveled and appeared in public. Today, modern security protocols exist partly because of lessons learned from historical tragedies like this one. But perhaps the most important impact was psychological. It changed how people viewed power. Before this era, many people believed powerful leaders were almost untouchable. After this era, the world understood something deeply uncomfortable. History can change in seconds. In the years following, new political movements emerged. Civil rights movements gained momentum. Anti-war protests grew. Youth culture transformed. The world entered a decade of social change unlike anything before. Some historians argue that this moment symbolically marked the end of post-war innocence. After this, societies became more skeptical, more questioning, more aware of political complexity. As time moved forward, new generations studied the event in classrooms, students debated it, scholars researched it, governments released documents, independent researchers analyzed evidence with new technologies, and still, interest never faded. Why does this event remain so powerful? Because it represents more than a historical incident. It represents the fragility of systems, the unpredictability of human actions, and the way one moment can influence decades of history. Think about how many global decisions were shaped by leaders who grew up witnessing that era. Think about how security, intelligence, diplomacy, and crisis response evolved afterward. History is not just about dates and events. History is about consequences. Today, well, more than 60 years later, the world is very different. Technology connects continents instantly, and information spreads faster than ever before. But you know, the emotional impact of that day still exists. Each generation rediscovers the story, asks new questions, and interprets it through its own lens. And that, really, is how history stays alive. Some people focus on official findings, some focus on unanswered questions, others, well, they focus on political context, and some focus on human tragedy, but everyone agrees on one thing: that day changed the world. It changed how governments think about risk. It changed how citizens think about leadership. It changed how history is recorded and remembered. And perhaps most importantly, it reminded humanity that history is never guaranteed. Progress is never permanent. Stability is never absolute. Every era believes it is stable, and every generation believes its systems are permanent. But, honestly, history repeatedly teaches the same lesson. Change can come without warning. You know, the story of that day is not just about politics, it's really about human vulnerability. It's about how societies react to shock, and well, how nations search for answers. And in the end, it's about how memory shapes identity. Today, historians, journalists, and researchers continue studying documents, analyzing evidence, and debating interpretations, not because they want to rewrite history, but because understanding the past helps societies prepare for the future. Because, you know, history is not just something that happened. History is something that continues influencing decisions today. And maybe that is the biggest lesson of all. Moments that last seconds can shape centuries. If you look back at world history, you'll see many turning points. Some were wars, some were discoveries, some were revolutions, and some were moments when the world simply stopped and realized how fragile everything really is. The story of November 1963 is one of those moments, a moment of shock, a moment of grief, a moment of transformation, and a reminder that history is not just written by time, history is written by moments. Thank you for listening to this documentary narrative. If this story made you think, if it made you reflect on history, leadership, and how fragile stability can be, then that means history is still doing its job, because history is not meant to be forgotten. History is meant to be understood, and understanding history is how we build the future.